Blood trickled down Marcus Daniels' forearm as the alien researcher tightened the restraints, seemingly oblivious to the damage being caused. The translucent being, with its 4 iridescent eyes blinking independently of one another, tilted its elongated head in what Marcus interpreted as curiosity. "Subject appears to be leaking fluid but shows minimal distress," the alien stated into a hovering recording device. "Fascinating." Marcus clenched his teeth. "I'm bleeding because those restraints are too tight, and yes, it hurts, but I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me panic." The alien who had introduced himself as Zephyr made a soft, whistling sound through the slits that served as his nostrils. "Apologies, human Marcus. Our research indicated your species requires significantly more pressure to experience discomfort." He loosened the restraints immediately, revealing raw skin beneath. "Research?" Marcus scoffed, flexing his fingers as circulation returned. "Is that what you call kidnapping people from their homes in the middle of the night?" It had been 3 days since Marcus woke up in this sterile white laboratory. 3 days of tests, questions, and being treated like an exotic specimen. The alien scientists, there were 7 of them altogether, seemed particularly fascinated by human responses to adversity. Zephyr carefully dabbed at the blood with a cloth that stung when it touched Marcus's skin. "We selected you specifically, Marcus Daniels. Your medical records indicate you survived an automobile collision that should have been fatal. You endured 17 surgical procedures, yet returned to full physical function. This is unprecedented in our knowledge of sentient species." Marcus remembered the accident. 2 years ago, a drunk driver had T-boned his car at an intersection. The doctors had told him later that his heart had stopped twice on the operating table. "Humans are tough," Marcus said simply. "We evolved on a harsh planet. We're good at surviving." "Yes," Zephyr agreed, his outer membrane shimmering with what might have been excitement. "But there is surviving, and then there is thriving despite severe trauma. Your species does both in ways that defy our understanding of biological resilience." A second alien entered the room. This one was shorter, with a pale green tint to its skin and only 3 eyes. Marcus had learned this was Nexar, Zephyr's research assistant. "The Council is requesting preliminary findings," Nexar announced, its voice a higher pitch than Zephyr's. "They wish to know if humans would make suitable colonists for the Draxis system." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Colonists? Is that what this is about? You're planning to relocate humans?" Zephyr waved a 6-fingered hand dismissively. "That is merely one possibility being explored. The Galactic Federation has strict protocols about integrating new species. Before any decisions are made, we must understand your physical and psychological limitations." "And if we don't meet your standards?" Marcus asked. Neither alien answered immediately. Finally, Zephyr spoke. "Then you would be classified as a protected species, confined to your home planet for your own safety." Marcus laughed bitterly. "So either you take us as slaves to your harsh worlds, or you quarantine us on Earth forever. Great options." "Not slaves," Nexar corrected, appearing genuinely disturbed by the suggestion. "Paid laborers with full rights under Federation law. The Draxis system's environments are inhospitable to most Federation species. But potentially suitable for humans," Zephyr added, "given your remarkable adaptability. So that's why I'm here. You're testing how much abuse a human body can take before it breaks." Zephyr's membrane rippled in what Marcus had come to recognize as discomfort. "We prefer the term stress tolerance assessment. Today's examination will measure your pain threshold and healing capabilities." Marcus tensed as Nexar approached with what looked like a medical cart. "I don't consent to this." "Unfortunately, consent is not required for preliminary species evaluation under Section 12 of the Federation Charter," Zephyr said, almost apologetically. "However, we will attempt to minimize unnecessary discomfort." "How thoughtful," Marcus replied sarcastically. Nexar prepared a series of instruments that looked disturbingly like surgical tools. We will begin with thermal resistance testing. Marcus tried to pull away as Nexar approached with a metallic rod that glowed faintly at one end. Wait, there are better ways to learn about humans. Let me talk to your counsel. Let me explain. His words cut off as the heated instrument pressed against his forearm. The pain was immediate and intense, like touching a hot stove but 100 times worse. Marcus screamed, unable to hold it back. Interesting, Zephyr noted, recording the reaction. Subject vocalizes but does not lose consciousness. Most species would enter shock from this level of thermal exposure. Tears streamed down Marcus's face as Nexar removed the rod, leaving an angry red burn on his skin. "You sadistic bastards," he gasped. "Not sadism," Zephyr corrected. "Scientific necessity, we must understand the full spectrum of human capabilities." The tests continued for what felt like hours. They exposed different parts of his body to extreme cold, electric shocks, and pressure tests that left Marcus bruised and trembling. Throughout it all, the aliens meticulously recorded his responses, seeming genuinely surprised at his continued consciousness and coherence. "Remarkable recovery rate," Nexar observed as they monitored the burn on Marcus's arm, which had already begun to blister. "Cellular regeneration is significantly faster than comparable species." Marcus, exhausted and in pain, could barely focus on their words. "Humans. We're not just bodies," he managed to say. "Our strength isn't just physical." Zephyr moved closer, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Explain." Drawing a ragged breath, Marcus continued, "It's our minds, our will. We've survived as a species because we don't give up. We adapt, we innovate, we endure." The alien scientists seem to consider this. "You suggest psychological resilience is as significant as physical endurance." "More significant," Marcus insisted. "You can break bones, burn skin, but breaking a human spirit, that's much harder." Zephyr and Nexar exchanged looks that Marcus couldn't interpret. After a moment of what seemed like silent communication, Zephyr nodded. "We will adjust our research protocol," he announced. "Tomorrow, we will begin psychological resilience testing." Marcus didn't like the sound of that, but at least it might give his body time to recover. As they released him from the examination table and escorted him back to his holding cell, he struggled to stay upright, his legs wobbly from exhaustion and pain. The cell was small but not uncomfortable: a bed, sanitation facilities, and even something resembling a desk and chair. Food appeared regularly through a slot in the wall, surprisingly palatable despite its unusual colors and textures. Marcus collapsed onto the bed, wincing as his injuries made contact with the firm surface. He examined the burn on his arm, now an angry red blister surrounded by inflamed skin. The aliens had applied some kind of translucent gel to it before returning him to his cell, and already the pain had diminished to a dull throb. As he lay there, staring at the featureless white ceiling, Marcus tried to process what he'd learned. These aliens weren't just studying humans out of scientific curiosity, they were evaluating whether humans could serve as workers on worlds too harsh for their own kind. The thought made him sick. Yet there was something else beneath his anger and fear: a growing realization that the aliens genuinely seemed surprised by human resilience. Maybe, just maybe, that could be leveraged somehow. Sleep eventually claimed him, his body desperately needing rest to heal. He dreamed of Earth, of open skies and freedom, and woke with renewed determination. These aliens might think they were in control of this study, but they had no idea what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. The next morning, or what passed for morning in the timeless environment of the laboratory, Zephyr arrived alone. "Where's your assistant?" Marcus asked, noticing the absence of Nexar. "Today's tests require a more nuanced approach," Zephyr explained. "Nexar has been assigned to another research subject." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Another human? You've taken others." "We have a statistically valid sample size," Zephyr confirmed, avoiding a direct answer. "Please follow me." This time, instead of the medical examination room, Zephyr led Marcus to a different part of the facility. This room was smaller, containing only a chair with restraints and what looked like a helmet with wires extending from it. "What's this?" Marcus asked warily. "A neural interface device," Zephyr explained. "It will allow us to present simulated scenarios directly to your consciousness and monitor your psychological responses." Marcus stopped at the threshold. "You want to go inside my mind?" "Not exactly." "The device creates immersive experiences that feel real, but it cannot access your thoughts or memories without your conscious participation." "And if I refuse?" Zephyr's membrane rippled. "Then we would be forced to return to physical testing methods." "I believe you would find this alternative preferable." Reluctantly, Marcus sat in the chair. As Zephyr secured the restraints more gently this time, Marcus tried to steady his breathing. "How does this work?" "The interface will create scenarios designed to test different aspects of psychological resilience, fear, isolation, moral dilemmas, sustained stress. Your responses will be monitored and analyzed." "Will it hurt?" "Not physically," Zephyr said, which wasn't exactly reassuring. "The experiences may be distressing, but no actual harm will come to you." As the helmet was lowered onto his head, Marcus closed his eyes. "Just remember, whatever you see in there, humans have survived worse." The first simulation plunged Marcus into complete darkness and silence. No light, no sound, not even the sensation of his own body. Just endless, formless void. He knew immediately what they were testing: isolation, sensory deprivation. The absence of all external stimuli was profoundly disorienting. Without reference points, his mind struggled to maintain a sense of self, of time, of reality. Marcus focused on his breathing, though he couldn't feel or hear it. He began to count, to recite poems and song lyrics in his head, anything to maintain some internal structure. When that wasn't enough, he started telling himself stories, elaborate tales constructed from memories and imagination. Hours seemed to pass, though it could have been minutes or days. Just as Marcus felt his grip on reality beginning to slip, the simulation changed. Now he stood on a narrow bridge spanning a bottomless chasm. Wind howled around him, threatening to push him over the edge. Ahead, the bridge crumbled away section by section. He had to move forward or fall, fear of heights a common human phobia. Marcus had never been particularly afraid of heights, but the simulation amplified every natural instinct to avoid falling. His heart raced, his palms sweated, his legs trembled. "One step at a time," he muttered to himself, forcing his feet to move. "It's not real, one step at a time." The bridge continued to disintegrate behind him as he moved, giving him no choice but to press forward. When he finally reached solid ground on the other side, the scene shifted again. This time, he found himself in what appeared to be a hospital corridor. Cries for help echoed from rooms on either side. Looking down, Marcus saw he was wearing a doctor's coat with a badge identifying him as emergency physician. A nurse rushed up to him, panic in her eyes. "Doctor, we have multiple casualties arriving. Triage protocol is in effect. You need to decide who gets treatment first." Moral dilemma testing how humans handle impossible choices. As victims were brought in, Marcus had to make rapid decisions about who received immediate care, knowing those he delayed might not survive. The simulation was cruelly realistic, with patients deteriorating before his eyes if not treated promptly. Marcus worked methodically, using what limited medical knowledge he had to assess severity, making gut-wrenching choices when resources weren't enough for everyone. When the simulation finally ended, Marcus found himself back in the chair, sweat soaking his clothes, tears streaming down his face. Zephyr stood nearby, monitoring readouts on a floating screen. "Fascinating," the alien researcher murmured. "Your stress hormones reached levels that would incapacitate most species, yet you maintained decision-making capability." Marcus could barely speak, his throat raw as if he'd been screaming, though he didn't remember doing so. How long was I in there?" 6 hours, Zephyr replied. Most subjects cannot endure more than 2 hours of continuous psychological testing without significant mental degradation. I told you, Marcus rasped. It's not just our bodies that are resilient, Zephyr approached, offering what looked like water in a transparent container. Indeed. Your psychological adaptability exceeds our projections by 127%. Marcus drank gratefully. Is this part of the test over now? For today, you require rest for optimal cognitive function. We will resume tomorrow with more complex scenarios. Back in his cell, Marcus lay awake despite his exhaustion. The simulations had been disturbingly real, and he could still hear the cries of the patients he hadn't been able to save. Even knowing it wasn't real didn't erase the emotional impact. He wondered about the other humans being tested. Were they experiencing the same things? Were they holding up? He had no way of knowing how many others had been taken or what was happening to them. As he finally drifted towards sleep, Marcus made a decision. These tests were revealing human resilience to the aliens, but they were also revealing something about the aliens to him. They had weaknesses, too, particularly their underestimation of human capabilities. Tomorrow, he would start looking for a way to use that against them. The next morning, when Zephyr came to escort him, Marcus was ready. He had noticed that the alien scientist always came alone now, perhaps trusting that Marcus was sufficiently docile or weakened. Before we begin today, Marcus said as they walked, I have a question about your research. Zephyr seemed pleased by the inquiry. Of course, scientific curiosity is admirable even in research subjects. You've mentioned that humans are unusually resilient compared to other species you've studied. What makes us so different? The alien hesitated, then apparently decided there was no harm in sharing. Most sentient species evolved in relatively stable environments, with biological systems optimized for efficiency rather than adaptability. Humans, by contrast, developed in highly variable conditions, facing numerous extinction-level threats throughout your evolution. Like the Ice Ages, Marcus suggested, among others. Your species survived at least 6 major extinction events that eliminated most competing large mammals. This created strong selection pressure for traits that enabled survival in rapidly changing environments. They had reached the neural interface room. As Zephyr prepared the equipment, Marcus continued his questions. Does your species have similar resilience? What kind of world did you evolve on? Zephyr's membrane rippled in what might have been pride. My species developed on Luxera, a world with minimal seasonal variation and few predatory threats. We evolved high intelligence and technological aptitude rather than physical endurance. So you're not as physically robust as humans. Marcus pressed. Correct. Our physiology prioritizes neural development and sensory perception. Our skin, for example, is significantly more sensitive than human dermis, allowing us to detect subtle environmental changes but also making us more vulnerable to physical trauma. This confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The aliens' careful handling of him, their surprise at his pain tolerance, it wasn't just scientific curiosity. They were fundamentally more fragile than humans. As Zephyr secured him in the chair, Marcus noticed something else. The alien moved with a slight favoring of his left side, as if uncomfortable. Are you injured? Marcus asked, nodding toward Zephyr's side. The alien seemed surprised by the observation. Nothing significant. A minor laboratory accident yesterday resulted in pressure damage to my lateral membrane. It will heal within a few days. Marcus filed this information away as the neural interface helmet was lowered onto his head. Today's simulations were even more intense than yesterday's scenarios of being trapped in burning buildings, submerged underwater, lost in freezing wilderness. Each test pushed him to the limits of endurance, forcing him to problem-solve under extreme duress. Through it all, Marcus remained acutely aware that these tests were revealing valuable information about the aliens themselves. Their surprise at his solutions, their fascination with his stress responses, all of it painted a picture of beings who, for all their technological advancement, lacked the fundamental resilience that humans took for granted. When the day's testing finally ended, Marcus was mentally exhausted but physically untouched. As Zephyr removed the interface helmet, Marcus noticed the alien's discomfort had worsened. His movements were stiffer, and the area where he'd mentioned the injury showed a darker coloration beneath the translucent skin. "Your injury seems to be getting worse," Marcus observed as they walked back to his cell. Zephyr made a dismissive gesture. "It is within acceptable parameters. Maybe for your species. If you were human, you'd probably be seeking medical attention by now." The alien scientist gave him a look that might have been curiosity. "Your concern is noted, though unnecessary. Rest now. Tomorrow's tests will focus on social resilience aspects." Once alone in his cell, Marcus began to formulate a plan. The aliens' fascination with human resilience could be their undoing if he could convince them to underestimate the danger he posed. They clearly saw humans as research subjects, not potential threats. That was an advantage. The next day, Nexar returned alongside Zephyr. The shorter alien seemed agitated, its 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "The Council has accelerated the timeline," Nexar announced without preamble. "They require conclusive findings within 2 days." Zephyr's membrane darkened with what looked like concern. "That is insufficient time for proper analysis. The human subjects require recovery periods between testing phases." "The decision is final," Nexar insisted. "The Draxus colonization project cannot be delayed. If human subjects prove unsuitable, the Council must have time to evaluate alternative species." Marcus listened carefully to this exchange, realizing it presented both danger and opportunity. Accelerated testing might mean more intense procedures, but it also meant the aliens would be under pressure, possibly making mistakes. "What's the rush?" Marcus asked. "Your Draxus system going somewhere?" Nexar turned to him, seeming surprised that he would interject. "The 3rd planet in the system is approaching optimal terraforming conditions. The window for initial colonization is narrow. And you need workers who can handle the harsh conditions while you finish making it comfortable for yourselves," Marcus concluded. "Precisely," Zephyr confirmed. "The environment will eventually be suitable for multiple species, but the initial phase requires colonists with exceptional environmental tolerance." "What if we don't want to be your colonists?" Marcus challenged. Nexar made a sharp whistling sound. "Want? The question is irrelevant. If humans are selected, appropriate compensation will be provided to your governing bodies. So you're buying us from our governments. That's slavery, no matter how you dress it up." "This discussion is unproductive," Zephyr interrupted. "We must proceed with today's testing protocols." Instead of the neural interface room, they led Marcus to a larger chamber where, to his shock, he saw 3 other humans. 2 men and a woman, all looking as haggard and stressed as he felt. They were seated at what appeared to be a conference table with various objects arranged on its surface. "Marcus Daniels, these are fellow research subjects Michael Porter, James Wilson, and Emily Watson," Zephyr introduced them. "Today's test will evaluate human cooperative behaviors under competitive stress conditions." The other humans looked at Marcus with varying expressions of wariness and relief, perhaps glad to see another human but uncertain of his role. "What are we supposed to do?" asked Emily, a thin woman with short blonde hair and dark circles under her eyes. "The task is simple," Nexar explained. "Before you are resources necessary for survival: water purifiers, medical supplies, food rations, and shelter components. However, there are insufficient quantities for all of you. You must decide how to allocate them." Marcus immediately understood the test. They wanted to see if humans would cooperate or turn on each other when resources were scarce. "And what happens to those who don't get resources?" James asked. He was older than the others, with graying hair and a deep gash on his forehead that looked partially healed. "They will experience simulated environmental hazards without protective measures," Zephyr stated. The consequences will be uncomfortable but not lethal. Marcus looked at the other humans, then at the supplies on the table. This is bullshit, he said firmly. They're trying to turn us against each other. Michael, a muscular man with a shaved head and what looked like burn marks on his arms similar to Marcus's, nodded slowly. Divide and conquer, classic tactic. So what do we do? Emily asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Marcus leaned forward. We work together, share everything equally, help each other through whatever hazards they throw at us. Cooperation may not be optimal given the limited resources, Nexar interjected. That's our decision to make, James responded firmly. What followed was a crash course in human solidarity. Despite the aliens' attempts to create conflict by introducing new scarcity problems or offering special treatment to individuals who betrayed the group, the four humans maintained their cooperative approach. They shared information about their experiences, developed strategies for the challenges ahead, and provided emotional support to each other. When the simulated environmental hazards began extreme heat, toxic gas, flooding, they worked as a team, using their pooled resources more effectively than any of them could have individually throughout the test. Marcus observed the aliens' reactions. Zephyr seemed genuinely fascinated by their cooperation, while Nexar appeared increasingly agitated, as if the results weren't aligning with expectations. At the end of the 8-hour test, all four humans had survived conditions that, according to the aliens' data, should have incapacitated at least half of them. Remarkable, Zephyr commented as they were escorted back to their separate cells. Social cohesion appears to significantly enhance individual resilience capabilities. That's humanity for you, Marcus replied. We're stronger together, always have been. Back in his cell, despite his exhaustion, Marcus felt a surge of hope. The day's test had given him crucial information. There were at least 3 other humans aboard this facility, and they were all capable and determined people. Moreover, he now knew the aliens were under time pressure from their council, which might make them careless. Most importantly, he'd seen how uncomfortable Nexar had become with their cooperation. The aliens seemed to have expected, perhaps even wanted them to turn on each other. That suggested the aliens feared human collective action more than individual resistance. Marcus spent the night planning. If he could communicate with the others, coordinate some kind of resistance. But how? They were kept in separate cells, only brought together under strict supervision. The answer came to him as he was drifting off to sleep. The neural interface. The device that had been used to test his psychological resilience might also be his means of escape. The next morning, when Zephyr came to collect him, Marcus noticed immediately that the alien scientist was alone and moving with even greater discomfort than before. His injury had clearly worsened. Final testing phase today, Zephyr announced. The council will review our findings tomorrow. What happens after that? Marcus asked as they walked. If humans are deemed suitable, a formal proposal will be presented to your world governments. If unsuitable, you and the other subjects will be returned to Earth with memory adjustments to remove knowledge of our presence. You'd erase our memories, a standard procedure for species protection. It would cause no harm. They had reached a different laboratory, larger than the previous ones. Inside, Marcus saw the other 3 humans already strapped to examination tables, various monitoring devices attached to their bodies. A team of aliens he hadn't seen before moved efficiently around the room, preparing equipment. What is this? Marcus demanded as he was led to the 4th table. Comprehensive physiological stress testing, Zephyr explained. We must verify that yesterday's cooperative performance wasn't anomalous. As Marcus was secured to the table, he looked over at the others. They all showed signs of previous tests, bruises, burns, cuts, but their eyes were alert and defiant. They exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The testing began with individual physical stressors, temperature extremes, electric stimulation, oxygen deprivation while monitoring their vital signs and stress hormone levels. Throughout, the humans called out encouragement to each other, maintaining their psychological connection even when physically isolated. Heart rate elevated but stable, one of the alien technicians reported. Cortisol levels within functional parameters. Increase stimulus intensity by 20%, Nexar ordered. He had entered the laboratory and now stood observing, his 3 eyes narrowed. Marcus gasped as the pain from the electric stimulation suddenly intensified. Across the room, he heard Emily cry out, then steady herself with deep breaths. "Remember Ecuador, guys," Michael called out through gritted teeth. "If we could survive that, we can survive this." Marcus had no idea what Ecuador referred to. It must have been something the others had discussed before he met them, but he understood the intent. It was a rallying cry, a shared reference point to build solidarity. "Ecuador," he echoed, and saw Emily and James nod in response. The aliens increased the intensity again. Marcus felt his muscles spasm, his vision blurring with pain. Yet somehow, hearing the others enduring alongside him made it more bearable. Human connection, even in suffering, provided strength. During a brief respite, while the aliens recalibrated their equipment, Marcus caught Zephyr's eye. The alien scientist was standing apart from the others, one hand pressed against his injured side, which now showed an alarming dark purple coloration. "Your injury needs treatment," Marcus said quietly. "It's getting worse." Zephyr moved closer, lowering his voice. "It is uncomfortable, but the research must be completed." "What happened exactly? You said a lab accident, a pressure seal failed during a materials test." "The resulting compression damaged my lateral membrane structure." Marcus studied the injury with new interest. "On Earth, we'd call that internal bleeding. It can be fatal if untreated." Before Zephyr could respond, Nexar approached. "The final phase is prepared. Maximum stress tolerance assessment. The subjects have already demonstrated exceptional resilience," Zephyr argued. "Further testing risks permanent damage." "The Council requires conclusive data," Nexar insisted. "Proceed as directed." As the alien technicians prepared the next round of tests, Marcus made his move. "Zephyr, listen to me," he said urgently. "That injury is serious. I can tell by the coloration. If your species is anything like ours, that's a sign of critical internal damage." The alien scientist's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of distress Marcus had come to recognize. "Our medical facilities are on the main vessel. This research platform has only basic treatment capabilities." "Then you need to get to the main vessel," Marcus pressed. "Soon." Nexar had moved away to supervise the equipment calibration. Marcus continued, his voice low and intense. "Humans have a saying, 'Physician, heal thyself.' You've been so focused on studying our resilience that you've ignored your own vulnerability. That's dangerous." Zephyr's membrane rippled with what might have been concern. "The research protocols will mean nothing if you're dead," Marcus interrupted. "And from what I can see, that's a real possibility if that injury goes untreated much longer." The alien was silent for a moment, his eyes focusing and unfocusing independently as if processing conflicting information. Finally, he spoke. "What would a human physician recommend for this type of injury?" Marcus saw his opening. "First, stop the testing. Stress affects not just us but you too, and it's clearly making your condition worse. Second, get proper medical imaging to assess the internal damage. Third, repair the damaged tissue before complications develop." "Reasonable recommendations," Zephyr acknowledged. Then louder, "Nexar, I am implementing a research pause. The subjects have demonstrated sufficient resilience for preliminary analysis." Nexar turned, his 3 eyes narrowing. "That is not your decision to make. The Council requires accurate data," Zephyr countered. "These subjects are approaching physical limits that may skew results. A recovery period is necessary for valid final assessments." The 2 aliens stared at each other in what seemed like a silent battle of wills. Finally, Nexar made a sharp, whistling sound of displeasure. 4 hours. Then we resume with or without your participation. As the technicians began disconnecting the monitoring equipment, Marcus caught the eyes of the other humans. He gave them a slight nod, hoping they would understand that something had changed, that an opportunity might be developing. Once freed from the examination table, Marcus approached Zephyr, who was now leaning against a console, clearly in pain. "You need medical attention," Marcus said firmly. "Now." "I will seek treatment after completing the research documentation," Zephyr replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "There won't be any documentation if you're incapacitated," Marcus pointed out. "Let me help you to your medical facility. You can barely stand." After a moment's hesitation, Zephyr nodded. "The others will be returned to their cells," he said, gesturing to the remaining aliens. "You will accompany me to the medical section." As they left the laboratory, Marcus walked close to Zephyr, ready to offer support if needed. The corridor outside was eerily quiet with no other aliens in sight. "Where is everyone?" Marcus asked. "Most personnel are preparing for the council presentation," Zephyr explained, his breathing now audibly labored. "This research platform operates with minimal staffing during final assessment phases." That was valuable information. Fewer personnel meant less resistance if an opportunity for escape presented itself. The medical section was a small facility with equipment Marcus didn't recognize. Zephyr activated a scanner that projected a 3-dimensional image of his internal structure. Even to Marcus's untrained eye, the damage was obvious, a large dark area beneath the purple discoloration visible on the surface. "That doesn't look good," Marcus observed. "What treatment options do you have?" Zephyr manipulated the scanner controls with shaking hands. "Membrane regeneration therapy is standard, but it requires specialized equipment on the main vessel. This facility has only basic stabilization capabilities." "Then you need to get to the main vessel," Marcus insisted. "How far away is it, docked above us?" "There is a transport shaft, but I cannot leave in the middle of critical research." Marcus saw his chance. "Look at that scan again. You're critically injured. If you were studying a human in this condition, what would your research notes say about survival probability without treatment?" Zephyr studied the scan, his membrane darkening. "Less than optimal," he admitted. "And if you collapse during the final testing phase, what happens to your research, to your career, to the council presentation?" The alien scientist made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Your reasoning is logical. I will request emergency transport to the main vessel's medical facility." "I'm coming with you," Marcus said firmly. "You need assistance, and I have medical training." This was a lie, but one Zephyr had no way of verifying. To his surprise, the alien didn't argue. "Very well. The transport requires authorization, which I can provide." As Zephyr communicated with the main vessel using a device on his wrist, Marcus quickly assessed his surroundings. The medical section had potential weapons, scalpel-like instruments, chemicals. Even the scanner itself could probably be repurposed. But violence might not be necessary if his developing plan worked. "Transport authorized," Zephyr announced. "We must proceed to level 4. They took what appeared to be an elevator to level 4, where a circular platform dominated the center of a large chamber. Zephyr was now leaning heavily on Marcus, his injury clearly causing significant distress. "How does this work?" Marcus asked as they stepped onto the platform. "Matter transmission," Zephyr explained weakly. "Our physical forms will be converted to energy patterns and reassembled on the main vessel." That sounded terrifying, but Marcus nodded as if it were perfectly normal. "What about the other humans? Will they be transported separately?" "After the final testing phase," Zephyr confirmed. "If the council approves." Marcus helped position Zephyr in the center of the platform, then stood beside him. "So this will take us directly to your medical facility?" "Correct. Stand still during the process." As Zephyr activated the transport using his wrist device, Marcus made his decision. The alien was weak, distracted by pain, and they were heading to a vessel that presumably had escape pods or shuttles. If he could get to the other humans after Zephyr received treatment. The transport activated with a high-pitched hum. Marcus felt a tingling sensation spread throughout his body, then a moment of disorientation as the research platform disappeared around them. When reality reassembled itself, they stood in a much larger, more sophisticated facility. Alien medical personnel immediately surrounded Zephyr, transferring him to a floating medical platform. In the confusion, no one seemed particularly concerned about Marcus's presence. "The human assisted me," Zephyr explained to the medical staff. "My injury would have been critical without intervention." One of the medical personnel, distinguished by a shimmering blue membrane, turned to Marcus. "You identified the severity of the internal damage." "Yes," Marcus replied confidently. "On Earth, I work as a trauma specialist." Another lie, but one that seemed to impress the alien. Fascinating. Few species can diagnose conditions outside their own biology. "Humans are adaptable," Marcus said simply. "Will Zephyr recover?" "With proper treatment, yes. The membrane regeneration process takes approximately 6 hours. 6 hours. That was a window of opportunity Marcus hadn't expected. With Zephyr incapacitated and apparently viewed as his sponsor on this vessel, he might have freedom to move around. "I should report to Nexar about Zephyr's condition," Marcus suggested. "Is there a communication station I can use?" The medical officer gestured to a console near the wall. "That terminal can reach the research platform. Do you require assistance operating it? I'll figure it out," Marcus assured him. "Humans are good at learning new systems." Left alone at the console, Marcus quickly realized he had no idea how to operate the alien technology. The interface was unlike anything he'd seen before, with symbols that shifted and changed as he looked at them. But he didn't actually need to contact Nexar. What he needed was information about the vessel's layout, security systems, and most importantly, where the other humans would arrive when transported. Pretending to work the console, Marcus observed the medical facility around him. The aliens moved with purpose, but seemed unconcerned about his presence. Zephyr had been moved to another room, visible through a transparent barrier, where a complex apparatus surrounded his injured side. After a few minutes of observation, Marcus approached the blue-membraned medical officer again. "Excuse me, I'm having trouble with the communication system. Also, I should prepare for the arrival of the other human subjects. Where will they be transported?" The alien studied him for a moment. "The primary reception bay on level 3, but they are not scheduled for transport until after final testing. Zephyr wanted me to brief them on his condition," Marcus improvised, "to maintain research continuity." Whether because the alien believed him or simply didn't care, it provided directions to level 3. Marcus thanked it and left the medical facility, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The main vessel was enormous compared to the research platform. Corridors stretched in multiple directions, with aliens of various configurations moving about their business. None paid particular attention to Marcus, perhaps assuming he was an authorized presence or simply unfamiliar with what a loose human should look like. Following the medical officer's directions, Marcus made his way to level 3. He encountered several security checkpoints but was waved through when he mentioned Zephyr's name and his role as a medical consultant. The alien's bureaucracy, it seemed, was as vulnerable to confidence tricks as any human organization. The primary reception bay was a massive chamber with multiple transport platforms similar to the one he'd arrived on. It was currently empty of personnel except for 2 technicians monitoring control panels. Marcus approached them with the same confident manner. "I need to prepare for incoming human subjects from the research platform. Zephyr's orders." One technician looked up briefly. "No transports are scheduled for the next 3 hours. That's why I'm here early," Marcus explained smoothly. "These subjects require special handling. I need to familiarize myself with the security protocols." The technicians exchanged looks but seemed unconcerned. One gestured to a console near the transport platforms. Standard containment fields activate automatically for non-crew arrivals. Override requires command authorization. That wasn't good news. If the others were transported directly into containment fields, helping them escape would be much more difficult. And where would they be taken after arrival? Marcus asked. Detention level, most likely. Non-Federation species aren't permitted free movement on medical vessels. Marcus nodded as if this was exactly what he expected to hear. Of course, and the shuttle bays, I'll need to prepare for their eventual transfer. Level 1, Section 12, the technician replied, then added suspiciously, but transfer protocols would come from the council, not medical staff. Marcus realized he was pushing his luck. Just being thorough, Zephyr's very particular about preparation. Before the technicians could question him further, an alarm sounded throughout the chamber. A voice spoke in the alien language, incomprehensible to Marcus, but the technicians immediately abandoned their posts and rushed toward an exit. "What's happening?" Marcus called after them. "Security breach on level 5, one shouted back. "All technical personnel to emergency stations." Left alone in the reception bay, Marcus saw his opportunity. He hurried to the control console the technicians had abandoned. The interface was still incomprehensible, but now he had time to experiment without being observed. After several failed attempts, Marcus managed to activate what appeared to be a communication link to the research platform. To his surprise, Emily's face appeared on the screen. "Marcus," she exclaimed. Where are you?" "On the main vessel," he explained quickly. "Listen carefully, we don't have much time. The research platform is understaffed right now. Most of the aliens are preparing for some council presentation." Emily nodded urgently. "We know. James managed to overpower one of the guards when they were returning him to his cell. We've taken control of the main laboratory, but we can't figure out how to operate the transport system." Marcus felt a surge of hope. So that explained the security breach alarm. "I'm in the reception bay where you'd arrive. But there's a problem, you'd be trapped in containment fields as soon as you materialized." Michael's face appeared beside Emily's. "We've got one of them hostage, Nexar. Could we use him to override the containment system?" "Possibly," Marcus said, thinking quickly. "But we need a better plan than just escaping to the main vessel. We need to get back to Earth." "There are shuttle bays on level 1, James's voice called from somewhere off-screen. "If we could reach those." "That's what I was thinking," Marcus agreed. "But we'd need to move fast before they realize what we're doing." Emily leaned closer to the screen. "Marcus, there's something else you should know. We found their research database. They've been testing humans for years, taking subjects and returning them with their memories erased. And the Draxis system, it's a death sentence. The conditions are so extreme that even with our remarkable resilience, the projected survival rate is less than 30%. Marcus felt cold anger spread through him. They're looking for disposable workers, he realized. They don't care if we die as long as we last long enough to prepare the planets for them. Exactly, Michael confirmed. So we need to not just escape but take this information back to Earth. People need to know what's coming. All right, Marcus said decisively. Here's the plan. Use Nexar to activate the transport system. When you arrive here, you'll be in containment fields. I'll try to figure out the override before you arrive, but if I can't, we'll need Nexar to disable them. He won't cooperate willingly, James warned. Then we'll have to be persuasive, Marcus replied grimly. Once you're free, we head straight for the shuttle bay, level 1, section 12. What about security? Emily asked. Won't they try to stop us? There's some kind of emergency happening on level 5, probably related to your escape. Security forces seem to be focused there for now, but we'll need to move fast. They quickly finalized the details, and Marcus returned to experimenting with the reception bay controls. After several tense minutes, he located what appeared to be the containment field settings, but couldn't determine how to disable them without proper authorization. Just as he was about to give up, the transport platforms activated. Shimmering energy fields appeared above them, coalescing into four figures: Emily, Michael, James, and a restrained Nexar. As predicted, translucent barriers immediately formed around the platforms, trapping the new arrivals. "Marcus," Emily called, her voice muffled by the containment field. "Did you figure out the override?" "Not yet," he admitted, approaching the nearest field where Nexar was contained. The alien's three eyes glared at him with unmistakable hatred. "You will not escape," Nexar hissed. "Security protocols are already activated." "Then we have nothing to lose," Marcus replied coldly. "Disable the containment fields, or your research on human resilience will get a lot more personal." James stepped forward within his own field, holding what looked like one of the alien's surgical instruments. "We found out what this does during our little tour of your lab," he said, activating the device so it emitted a faint glow. "Very painful for your species, apparently." Nexar's membrane darkened with fear. After a moment's hesitation, he spoke rapid commands in his own language. The containment fields flickered and disappeared. "Smart choice," Marcus said, quickly joining the others. "Now you're going to lead us to the shuttle bay." "The vessel is on security lockdown," Nexar protested. "All transportation systems are disabled." "Then you'll enable them," Michael said, pressing the surgical instrument against Nexar's side. "Unless you want to experience what you've been so eager to study in us." With Nexar as their reluctant guide, the humans made their way through the vessel. Alarms continued to sound, but the corridors were largely empty, with security forces apparently concentrated elsewhere. They encountered only minimal resistance, a few medical personnel who quickly retreated when confronted, and one security officer who Michael efficiently disabled with a technique that left Nexar staring in horrified fascination. "Your species' capacity for controlled violence is unsettling," the alien commented as they entered a lift that would take them to level 1. "We didn't ask to be here," Emily reminded him coldly. "You took us from our homes, tortured us in the name of science, and planned to use us as disposable labor. Your lucky controlled violence is all you're experiencing." When they reached Level 1, Section 12, they found the shuttle bay sealed under security protocols. Nexar, now trembling visibly, was forced to override the lockdown using his authorization codes. The bay contained several small craft, sleek and clearly designed for speed rather than comfort. James, who had apparently been a pilot in the human military, quickly identified the simplest vessel to operate. "This one has basic navigation controls I might be able to figure out," he said, examining the shuttle's cockpit. "But we'll need launch clearance." All eyes turned to Nexar. The alien's resistance had been steadily crumbling as he witnessed the humans' determination and adaptability firsthand. Now, faced with their united demand, he seemed to reach a decision. "I will provide launch clearance," he said quietly, "but you must take me with you." This was unexpected. Marcus exchanged glances with the others. "Why would you want to come with us?" he asked suspiciously. "Because the Council will hold me responsible for this security breach," Nexar explained. "The penalty for such failure is severe. I prefer taking my chances with humans." After a brief discussion, they agreed to Nexar's request, though they would keep him restrained until they were safely away from the alien vessel. The alien provided the necessary clearance codes, and James began preparing the shuttle for launch. "There's a data terminal here," Emily said, examining a console near the shuttle's entrance. "If we could download the research files, we'd have proof of what they've been doing." Marcus nodded. "Nexar, show her how to access the database." Under close supervision, the alien guided Emily through the download process. "This contains all research data on human subjects," he confirmed, "including historical records and the Draxis colonization plans." As James announced the shuttle was ready, alarms suddenly intensified. "Security forces approaching Shuttle Bay," an automated voice announced in the alien language, which Nexar translated with evident anxiety. We need to go now, Marcus urged, helping Emily board with the downloaded data. They sealed the shuttle just as security personnel burst into the bay. James activated the launch sequence, and the small craft shot out of the bay into open space. Through the view screen, they saw the enormous alien vessel receding behind them, a massive structure that dwarfed any human spacecraft. "Setting course for Earth," James announced, working the unfamiliar controls with impressive skill. "Based on stellar positioning, we're approximately 3 days' journey at this vessel's maximum speed. Will they pursue us?" Emily asked Nexar, who sat rigidly in a rear seat, still restrained but noticeably calmer than before. "Unlikely," the alien replied. "The risk of detection by broader human observation systems would violate Federation protocols. My people prefer to operate unseen." Marcus studied their reluctant companion. "So what happens when we reach Earth? What will you do?" Nexar's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "I do not know, perhaps request asylum. My knowledge of Federation technology and plans could be valuable to your species. Defecting to the primitives." Michael said with a harsh laugh, "That's got to hurt your scientific pride." "My research conclusions were incorrect," Nexar admitted, surprising them all. "I believed human resilience was primarily physical and evolutionary adaptation to harsh conditions. But I failed to account for your psychological and social resilience factors." "You mean our stubbornness and teamwork," Emily suggested. "Those terms are inadequate," Nexar said, his tone taking on a lecturer's cadence despite his circumstances. "Your species possesses a unique combination of individual determination and collective cooperation that exceeds rational self-interest parameters. When one human should logically surrender to preserve themselves, they instead endure for the benefit of others. It is remarkable." Marcus thought about their journey from captives to escapees, from test subjects to defenders of their species. Each of them had faced moments when giving up would have been easier, when pain or fear should have overwhelmed their resistance. Yet they had persevered, not just individually but together, drawing strength from one another. "That's humanity for you," he said simply. "We endure." As Earth grew larger in their view screen 3 days later, Marcus reflected on what their return would mean. They carried evidence of an alien presence studying humanity, of plans to exploit human workers for dangerous colonization efforts. The world would never be the same once this information became public. Yet he felt oddly optimistic. If these aliens had underestimated human resilience so badly, perhaps others would make the same mistake. And if humanity could face this new reality with the same determination and solidarity that had enabled their escape, perhaps they could forge their own destiny among the stars, not as someone else's disposable colonists, but as equals. Beside him, Nexar stared at the approaching blue planet with all 3 eyes wide open. "Your world is beautiful," the alien said softly. "I begin to understand why your species fights so hard to survive." "It's not just about survival," Marcus corrected him. "It's about living on our own terms." "That's what you never understood in your research. Humans don't just endure, we insist on thriving, on making meaning out of suffering, on helping each other through the worst circumstances." "A lesson I will not forget," Nexar acknowledged. "Nor, I suspect, will the Federation when they learn of our escape." As the shuttle began its descent toward Earth, Marcus exchanged glances with his fellow humans. They were injured, exhausted, forever changed by their ordeal, but they were going home, carrying knowledge that might save countless others from a similar fate. That made every moment of suffering worthwhile. In the end, the alien scientists had gotten exactly what they wanted: conclusive data on human resilience. But the conclusions were not what they had expected, and the implications would echo across the stars for generations to come.